So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 423, and this is in fact the climax of not just the final battle, but for the series of My Hero Academia as a whole. And this chapter is a little bit controversial, and we'll be diving into why that may be the case, but first, right after this. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Andrew, and I'm here to do my manga review for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 423, titled One for All versus All for One. Yes, it's finally here. The final clash between the two major antagonistic and protagonistic forces in the series, Deku versus All for One. Tomura Shigaraki versus All for One. One for All versus everybody. Yeah, this chapter is pretty much the conclusion to, for the most part, the battle and the war. And you'll get to see why it's the case, but there's also some issues that may plague this chapter when it comes to how certain characters are handled, with this being like the final moment. And I'll give my thoughts and the thoughts of the community when it comes to this chapter in this review. So let's just dive right into it and really talk about the chapter. And to start off, the chapter just begins with a masterful image of Deku just landing a decisive punch on Tomura, or should I say All for One, in this moment, as All for One begins to realize, how did this even happen? How did I allow him to get close to me? Where he comes to the realization that because his body isn't regenerating, and the fact that all of the heroes and their malice was coming towards him, that Danger Sense was unable to be activated, that he realized that their plan was to make a way for Deku to come and collide with All for One in this moment. And from what we're getting, it's not that All for One is being attacked by like a major force from Deku hitting him alone, but also confirmation that Deku is transferring over the rest of One for All, or the looming flames or the looming embers inside of him, into All for One. And this is something interesting because the chapter also explains how this is possible. And the idea is that we all thought that he had transferred One for All to All for One many chapters ago, but it's actually revealed that a little small piece of One for All still resided in Deku. Not necessarily the embers, but actually a small part of One for All. And that because that small part still resided in him, he was able to, in a way, still be able to transfer Nanashimura into All for One to try and bring Tomura or Tenko back, which kind of explains that plot hole that we thought was a plot hole, but it's actually not. But also something else that we learned in this chapter is the reveal that because of pretty much the damage that All for One has sustained, not necessarily physically, but also mentally, that his body is beginning to crumble, and that this is more confirmation that this is the final battle and that All for One is about to be defeated. However, he will not stand by and allow it to happen, because as everyone thinks that the fight is about to end, All for One uses the last remaining quirks inside of him to pretty much stitch himself back together, where he comes to a resolve that, okay, I'm almost gone. I have to start over from scratch. I have to give my quirk to Deku, who is now quirkless, or to a random hero, and start over. And how he says that he has to keep repeating this process, very much like he did with Tomura. And how he's about to go and capture Deku in this moment, but is actually intervened by Shirokumo, or should I say Kurogiri, in this moment. Because Kurogiri is acting on his own ideals or his own wants to try and protect Tomura, and even talks to All for One to give Tomura back because the other villains and his friends are waiting for him. And the implication is that at this moment, he's either about to warp Deku away somewhere or warp All for One somewhere else, but before he even gets that chance, Bakugo actually comes in, and from what it seems to be, completely eradicates what's left of Shirokumo Kurogiri in this moment. And Bakugo is here with a surprise to everyone, but it's kind of explained that he was supposed to be going to the hospital, but actually came here and used his explosions as well as the help of Shoto to get him up here to stop Kurogiri, but also give Deku most likely a slight boost to finally finish off All for One. So everything is coming together, especially with the final clash that Deku has on All for One. And what is very interesting about this moment is that you have Deku saying that he'll never forgive All for One, but that he doesn't view All for One as a monster beyond understanding, or even the Demon King, but he views All for One as just a lonely man. Which is actually very interesting and very apt for the character of All for One, because while we want to assume that All for One is just this evil and duplicitous asshole evil person, we've seen that, especially through this final war, that he's a lot more human than we want to give him credit for. And how this is actually leading to the final just conflict of All for One, which will inevitably be his ultimate defeat in this chapter. And it starts off with the reveal that I was talking about earlier of Yoichi One for All still residing inside of Deku, and Deku transferring it to All for One in this moment as he's clashing with Tomura, or All for One, as All for One tries to block it with his hand, but Deku punching through it. This is where we really get the final characterization of All for One, about how he realizes that he finally has One for All in his grasp, that the main thing that he was searching for is his younger brother, and that he's right there, and how he just wants to see his younger brother's face one more time now that he has One for All in his hand, but it's impossible. His brother is about to disappear, and it's revealed that Deku was able to power down part of One for All before he transferred it all to him completely, allowing him to still have a little bit of it inside of him before this final confrontation, implying that he still had the quirk, but now he is objectively quirkless at this moment. And how the little brother says that he couldn't really help his brother stop being this evil person, and that it's now for both of them to finally end, for them to stop all of this madness and destruction, as All for One declares his love for his little brother. But in the shadows and in the light, we have Deku, the other vestiges of One for All, and even Tomura Shigaraki coming out, punching the vestige of All for One, completely and utterly eradicating him, causing the end of One for All and All for One. And this is very interesting because this is just the accumulation of what the characterization of All for One is. This person who views themselves as the Demon King, but it's just a lonely man that strives to want to connect with others, but was unable to do so, so used violence, manipulation, and control to have that sense of unity. But he realized most likely that that is never going to be the case with him. And because he could never truly realize his dreams, he wanted to eradicate the dreams of everyone else. Because one way that he most likely feels that he will never be alone is if he's able to crush the dreams of everybody else, and everyone will be forced to remember him. And that he will not be alone because he believes that he will now live in the memories of everyone that he has conquered. This is a very cool way to view All for One as more than just a single layer of I am evil for evil's sake, and that he definitely does have some depth, and that this is very much shown with his ultimate defeat, being defeated by not only his younger brother, but also the people that he has attacked, put down, and tracked down for multiple years, and the people that he has manipulated and hurt the most being the final things to actually defeat him, just showing the peakness of the irony that is All for One, where one person is able to allow all of them to destroy him. But yeah, that's a very cool ideal or symbolism, as well as we see like the darkness where Tomura Shigaraki is and the evil that was within him, and Deku being on the light side as they are coming together in the middle to clash and destroy him. And this is where a little bit of the controversy for this chapter comes into play, because many people believe that within the next few pages, Tomura Shigaraki is defeated and dead, and they feel as if that he has wasted potential, and that this is something that shouldn't be done to the main antagonistic force of the series, and that it's gone too soon, and that it's rushed. However, we need to realize that the catharsis that has been coming from this chapter is the accumulation of all of the chapters prior to this. Even with the return of All for One in chapter 419, it was 418 where we got the real catharsis of Tomura's defeat. that was the moment where Tomura was defeated, and this is just continuing on from that moment. Because if you more or less cut the middle section of this fight out from 419 upwards to 422, this is just a continuation of those chapters, and we see it with the conversation that Deku has with Tomura in this moment, while short, still very much impactful. Where it's revealed that he thought that he was disappearing in reference to Tomura, but he was saved by Grandma, Nana Shimura, which makes sense where you have Tomura Shigaraki, the last moment where he was in this death-like state, was saved by Nana in this moment. And a criticism that you can have is that we do not necessarily see any form of conversation for how Nana was able to do it, but the implication and prior knowledge allows this to flow smoothly within this moment without the necessity of actually seeing the conversation prior. As well as just Tomura addressing the fact that he wasn't able to destroy anything, and you may be questioning what that means. And it has more to do with anything as in like the core of hero society and like the world as a whole, and how this is most likely referring to what Spinner said in the war around chapter 292, where Spinner also brought up in that moment Tomura Shigaraki wasn't really destroying anything. Even though he technically destroyed a city, he didn't destroy anything that is related to his core values, aka the ideals of All Might and the world or the hero society that created him. And how he kind of confirms about the fact that he was a crying child and that he was unable to crush Deku's hand, which is most likely referring to the hand that was actually punching Tomura's body a few panels prior to this actual conversation, as well as more or less the metaphorical lending of the hand, aka Deku lending his hand to try and help and save Tomura Shigaraki. And how this is a short conversation, but to me it's very pungent, because it is just a continuation of what we saw last chapter, but just adding a little bit more perspective from Deku, who realizes that he could not forgive the actions that Tomura were performing when it comes to putting people's lives in danger, but he still wants to stop Tomura in this moment, not just because he wanted all of the pain to stop with the civilians and other people, but he also wanted the sadness inside of Tomura to stop and not to be passed on. AKA, Deku wanted to stop the cycle of hatred that was created, and to a certain extent, he did. Because as Tomura completely fades away, he leaves Izuku Midoriya with a single piece of information that he wants to convey to Spinner. That if Spinner is still alive, to tell him that Tomura Shigaraki fought until the end to destroy. And how Deku confirms that he will do this as the final page of the chapter is the sky breaking apart, the sun shining, the clouds dispersing, the rain ending, being the literal symbolic representation of the war finally coming to an end and the day being saved by the heroes. And to go into just what Tomura is saying in this final moment, while it may seem that he actually didn't continue to fight to destroy and end everything, he does, because no matter what All For One says, he still very much did not understand Tomura. And that even though everything seems to have forced Tomura to do all of this by the machinations of All For One, Tomura still had a choice to play. And while that choice is very much skewed by All For One and Hero Society, he still made a choice, and that choice is connected to the friends that he made with the League of Villains. And now, another criticism that you can have of this chapter and the story as a whole is that we really didn't see a whole lot of interactions with the League of Villains to show that Tomura Shigaraki actually cared about him, or even really seeing his reaction to his friends post-war. But I think that I am somewhat fine with it because Tomura has never really been as actively caring about the League of Villains in comparison to other members of the League of Villains, such as Spinner, such as Toga, such as Twice. They cared more about the League of Villains than Tomura Shigaraki did, but he still did care for them at the very least to allow for one of his teammates to still hold on to the faith that he still upheld his ideals and still give him the motivation to keep moving forward. Because with Spinner, of all people, If he realizes that Tomura's ideals eventually were changed, it would most likely crush him and hurt him in a mental state more than what he already is, and Tomura most likely doesn't want that to happen. Because Spinner was the one villain on the League of Villains that really cared for Tomura's ideals the most. So for him to be able to realize that Tomura still fought to the end is going to give him some form of closure, which is most likely showing that Tomura at the very least did very much care for Spinner. And I think that this is, while not the best ending, and maybe we could have gotten more dialogue and interactions between Deku and Tomura in this moment, I still think that this is a fine ending for the character of Tomura. And like many villains, he was not necessarily redeemed in this moment, but he was very much saved, if not physically, to a certain extent mentally, by the fact that he had every opportunity to continue to destroy, but chose not to. He could have continued to choose and destroy Deku in this moment, but he finally chose not to do it. And that at this moment, he is no longer holding the hatred, sadness, and sorrow in his heart, and by not holding on to those emotions, he's in a way free and in a way saved. But yeah, that is my thoughts for this chapter. And for as many people that may like it, and for as many people that may dislike it, I am on the side of liking this chapter a lot. I still think that this chapter very much holds to the idealisms and the metaphors and the motifs and the themes that My Hero Academia has established throughout the entire series. And I think that most likely what's going to be happening is that we're going to be following those motifs and those ideas into the epilogue, which based off this chapter is potentially going to be an entire volume, which is actually something not very common when it comes to shonen series. Most shonen series end at the final fight and then an epilogue chapter or two afterwards. But I think My Hero Academia may have an actual volume between 5 to 11 chapters. 5 chapters, but the last chapter will be a combination or a longer page count of potentially upwards of 30 to 40 pages, which is roughly around 4 to 5 chapters. And I do think that potentially Deku has lost the quirk of One for All, which I still feel fits into the idea that he could still be a hero without a quirk, which ties into chapter 1. But some of the ideas that I saw is that maybe in this last moment, Tomura transferred over a quirk or two to Deku so he won't be quirkless, or that All for One and One for All fuse together to create a brand new quirk inside of Deku. Either way, I can be fine with both of them because they could both have just this representation or ideals, metaphor, motifs, all of that are still tied to the chapter as well as tied to the story of My Hero Academia when it comes to working together, friendship, and the like. But yeah, I think those are the things that may be happening within the next chapter or two, and maybe a reenactment of that one colored page by Horikoshi of Uraraka coming to help and save Deku, who is currently in the air about to fall to the ground without a quirk. Because hey, if Bakugo could arrive here with all of those heavy injuries, so could Uraraka. But yeah, that's all I really have to say for the chapter. And let me ask you this. How do you feel about My Hero Academia ending potentially with this chapter? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And did you enjoy the story of My Hero Academia so far? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!